we're going to set up the labels for our organization purely for files and emails, so unstructured data. The next thing we do is we decide whether or not we need encryption or content marking. Now, if you think back to SBD episode 1, you'll know that the protective controls for the public classification are no encryption, no access restrictions, but we will visually mark the document. So in this case, we simply want to tick mark the content of files and leave encrypt files and emails completely blank. It's essentially identical to the public label. The general label is intended to be information which includes internal business data, which is not meant for public consumption. And this information can be used by all employees and can be shared with authorized customers and business partners as needed. Now, the thing here is we configured it identically to public. There's visual marking, no encryption, no access restrictions. The confidential label is slightly different to the other labels we've had so far because it represents a parent label. Within confidential, we're going to have two sub-labels, recipients only and internal only. So we need to understand how to configure a parent label versus how to configure a child. Now, the recipients only label is designed for sensitive business information, which is meant to be consumed on a need-to-know basis. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add visual marking and we're going to add encryption. And the encryption will essentially be do not forward, do not print, do not remove the encryption. And in this case, this data includes sensitive business information and is meant to be accessed by internal employees only because exposing this data to unauthorized users may cause damage to the business. So now we can see our full taxonomy created, but at the moment, none of my users will see any of those labels inside their Office applications. So the next step that we need to go through is actually publishing those labels to the users that need them. So before we go any further, I want to hand it over to Waleed to show us what his Office applications look like right now before we publish any label policies.
I'm connected to my mailbox and I am going to send an email to user 2. Traditionally, when I try to label an email, I go to the sensitivity label button here, and then I can select whatever label published to me. However, when I try to find the sensitivity label button here, I cannot find it. And the reason for this is there is no labels published to me at this stage.
We'll go back to our label definitions and we can see our two policies. The global policy that's highest in the list that everyone has access to, and the one lower in the list for the COVID-19 research label policy that gives access to the highly confidential label. So in our next episode, Waleed is going to show us what that looks like in the Office client.
All right, so we are back with user 1 logging to the domain droid machine, and we will see the behavior now once it synchronized the policy. So I will hit new email and I will try to send to user 2. And then just type a random message. Now I will try to label this email, and as you can see clearly, once Mac has published the labels to the user 1, which is in scope, I can see the sensitivity label, which is the built-in with the Office sensitivity client, that I can see using my user.1 at M365 SC demo.live, that I can see all the published label that is assigned or in scope for user.1. I can mark it as public, general, confidential, etc. I can even see the learn more. If I click on learn more, I will go to the tfwiki.net, which Mac has set up. So the only other thing that I need to point out that user.1 is not part of the COVID research group. So that's why user.1 is not seeing the highly confidential label that is set as part of the second label policy that Meta has just set up. Now we should log into a user that is part of that DL and see what they can see on the label client. Another important test or validation that we need to show you is the default label behavior. As Maka showed you, it was set up as part of the first label policy that he published. So we will just try to log in to our OneDrive for user 1 and then create a Word document. and we'll create it important. Once you open that document, and again, it's on OneDrive for Business, it has the autosave, you can clearly see here the default label is classification-general, which is the default label for everything that is created in the OneDrive for Business or generally in Office. But you have the ability also to change that label. As you can see, I can go for public. And then as part of the policy that Maca just set up as well, that I have to provide the justification, I can say previous label is no longer applies, or other. I can say because I want to. Obviously, this is not a valid justification. However, we have to accept I'm part of the team now. As you can see, the classification header has just changed to the color, and you can see the watermark there changed the color exactly as Maca set it up in the first place. If you want to reopen it again, it's stick, so it's not changed. And this is how the default label behaves in the Office Windows app. Now, we logged back into the same machine, which is domain join, etc., but using a different user, which is user 7. The only new thing that we need to mention here is user 7 is part of the COVID-19 research group, which we included as a group that should see the highly confidential label as part of the second label policy that Maca just set up. Now, we are connected to user 7 mailbox through Outlook, and we will try to send an email to our friend user 1. And when we click on the sensitivity label button now, you can see clearly the highly confidential label, which is now showing to user 7 because user 7 is part of the scope of the label policy the Maca set up. Now, let's mark this email as highly confidential and send it off. As you can see, the policy tip here says the email is marked highly confidential, and we hit send. Now we're back to our machine using user 1 as the login user. Connect to user 1 mailbox, and you can clearly see that the email we just sent from user 7 with subject COVID-19. As you can see here, the little lock, that means it's encrypted. The user 1 can actually double click on it, can read it, can decrypt the message because they have access to. However, if we try to, let's say, forward the email on, if you remember the settings on highly confidential, the forward button is do not forward. That's why it's dimmed out. Also, if you try to print it, the print is grayed out. That means the permission applied and the user cannot really change or they take them away. This is how we protect these sort of information types by using highly confidential. Now, let's go back to user 7 and check on the mandatory labeling behavior. Now we're back here again on the same machine, logging as user 7. Let's see the mandatory labeling behavior on the Word application. So we will create a Word document on the desktop, double click on it. Remember, this brand new, and straight away here you can see that the policy tip asking the user to set a label. Now, once the user 7 hit the select label, they'll be able to see all the published label to them. Let's select highly confidential and apply. Straight away, you can see all the headers, footers, watermark that is applied or attached to the highly confidential label. Let's do one last test. So let's say I'm going to send another email to an internal user, which is user.1 again. And then let's mark the email as confidential internal only. So theoretically, this label should be only used when sending specific information types to internal users. Let's say user 7 by mistake included an external recipient. When we say external, that a user does not belong to our current tenant. Oh, I added an external user. So let's see the behavior there. Now we log back in using user 1. We just sent the internal only email to, and you can clearly see the email we just sent from user 7 mailbox, and you can see here it's marked as confidential internal only. We double click on that one, we can clearly decrypt and we can get access to the data within that email, and we can see that the external email address here as well. So I will hand it over back to Maka to show the external recipient behavior, and we take it from there.
Okay, thanks, Waleed. So here we are now in this external tenant, and I'm sitting here with the email address that was sent to by accident by Waleed using the confidential internal only label. And I can see that looks like something juicy's arrived from user 7, and I'm getting pretty excited already. So my administrator at the other end decides to click the mail, and the first sign that we've got here that maybe something is a little bit amiss is that we're seeing the wrapper email that Office Message Encryption sends. Sometimes when you're sending to an external social recipient, but you generally see this when you don't have access to the mail as well. So it's asking me to read the message. So what I will choose to do as this admin who really wants to see the juicy information inside it, I'll click read the message, and it's now going to redirect me to the Office Message Encryption portal, and it's going to ask me to authenticate. Now what's going to happen is, because I'm not a member of that template, I'm not someone on the template who should have rights to the document, it will take my authentication, check it against the encrypted template, see that this account does not have access to the content, and block me from getting in. So I'll choose to sign in with a work or school account like so, and it's trying to sign me in. And I'm going to accept these permissions. You'll get this the first time you try to access an M365 Office Messaging Encryption application. And it now attempts to decrypt the message. Now you can see that it's trying to open the mail, and because I don't have access based on the settings of the template, it immediately shows me I don't have permission to view the message. So the benefit here is, even when you accidentally send an encrypted document or an encrypted email to someone and they're not part of the legitimate set of users on the template, it stops them getting in. So the benefit here, Waleed, is because you've accidentally sent that critical information out to someone that shouldn't see it, because you set the label correctly, it's still protected and they can't see it.
All right, so before I hand it over to Maka to walk us through the Activity Explorer, let's change or update the highly confidential label configuration. So as Maka configured the highly confidential label, if you remember correctly, we gave access to unencrypt the content to everyone within the organization. So highlighting the highly confidential and clicking on editing label, going to the encryption section, you will see that everyone within our tenant actually can open or access the content. They have a custom permission in that space. And going back to our test that we performed before, if you recall, when user 7, who is part of the COVID-19 research group, who has access legitimately to the highly confidential label, we sent an email to user 1 just for testing access. And you can see here I'm connected to the user 1, and I can open or double click on the email and I can access the content, which means user 1 has the right permission to unencrypt the content. However, as the highly confidential label is meant to be used with the highly sensitive information related to COVID research, which means only COVID research group should be able to use the label, whether sending emails or receiving and access the content of highly confidential data. So the change or the update that we're going to perform now is just giving the COVID-19 group the required access and remove everyone else. Now we know how it works. So going back to the highly confidential label, and under the encryption permission, we will add user groups, and we will look for the COVID-19 group. add them. And as you can see, now we have added the COVID-19 research group. We will remove the all users permission. As you can see, the COVID-19 group retain the same permission that we had before, the custom permission, which includes no print, no forward, etc. So let's save that. Save. Delete them here as well. And we don't have any auto label for purview. And then we finish and save. As you can see, the label configuration has been updated. Now, let's confirm that the highly confidential label configuration has been updated and reflected. So I'm connected to the user 7 mailbox, which is part of the COVID-19 research group. So they have access to the highly confidential label. Let's send another email to user.1. And this time we will label the email as highly confidential. You can see here it's updated and we will hit send. Now we're back to the user 1 mailbox and we can see that we have received an email from user 7 again with the lock. That means it's encrypted. We try to access it as usual. It says it has a restricted permission to access. Let's double click on it because usually we have access to it. We double click on it and boom, we can see straight away the encryption wrapper here because user 1 does not have access to the highly confidential protected data any longer. Now over to Mecca.
Okay, so we've seen quite a lot of stuff here. We've created some labels, we've tested them out, you've seen people get into them, you've seen people get blocked, you've seen what happens when you have more than one label policy. Now let's bring it all together with our good old friend Activity Explorer. Now Activity Explorer is something you'll see quite a lot throughout this particular series. When I click on Activity Explorer, this is going to drill into the M365 Unified Audit Log to give me a trail of what's been happening in the environment and what users have been doing in the environment. And we can see here straight away, we have a reasonably interesting little bar graph that gives us information about how many files have been read, how many labels have been applied, how many labels have been changed. Now you'll remember earlier on, Waleed was working with one of his labels and he changed that label, thus causing a justification prompt to appear and getting him to answer why it was he changed that. And we can see exactly what's been happening. So as we scroll down here, we can see, for instance, remember important.docx with the sensitivity label of general, that was a document that Waleed was working with. And if you remember right, he changed it to public. Now, as an administrator, I might like to be able to see what's been going on in the environment. Maybe people have been changing labels everywhere. Maybe they shouldn't be doing that. So from here, I have a very, very detailed drop down of exactly what's happening. What's the activity? When did it happen? What was the client IP address it came from? What was the name of the file? Which user did it? What sensitivity labels were involved? Were any sensitive information types involved? And we'll be talking, of course, a lot more about sensitive information types as we go through this video series. And we also get information about the location details. So where did it happen on the device? And what site did it happen in? In this case, it looked like his personal OneDrive. Now, as you remember, he changed the label. And if we just click one section up here, we can actually see the label change occurring. We can see that he's manually applying a label downgrade through the event label type here and the justification because I want to, which is as good a justification as any. So we can see now that we have gone from an old sensitivity label of general to a new sensitivity label of public. Now, thinking about this as an admin and as an auditor, I might see something like that. And in certain circumstances, that might prompt me to go and actually ask that user what was going on. Now, these flyouts are really good, but the information we see here can also be filtered, as you can see above. So we can filter by date, we can filter by the type of activity, We can filter by the location that activity occurred. We can even filter by username or even filter by the sensitivity label in question. And if you want to play around with extra filters, you've got those capabilities here as well. So really granular ability to drill down into the types of information that we want to see. Additionally, in the output here that we were working with before to get the flyouts, we can also add or remove different types of columns as necessary. So maybe we want to pull in sensitivity label, an old sensitivity label, and hit apply, and straight away we can see that information in here through that change of policy that we had before. So really granular activity, and we can even export this data to a CSV file for later analysis if necessary. So really, really powerful stuff, and places we will keep coming back to during this series to see the types of information that we capture. All right, well, that's all we've got for you for the base labeling demonstration today. So what you've seen is the ability for us to create labels, create label policies, test those labels in a number of different circumstances, as well as look at the activity that comes through at the end of the day on Activity Explorer. Now, make no mistake, this is only the beginning. So you're going to be seeing a lot more around labeling, a lot more around DLP across different types of operating systems as well. Sure, we focused on Windows today, but what do we do with Office Online? What do we do with iOS, Android, and Mac OS? Rest assured, we'll be showing all of those as we go along in different scenarios. So thanks very much for watching, and next time we'll be getting a little bit further into another type of labeling, being container labeling. So hope to see you there.
Welcome back. Thank you for watching so far, and I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to watch our next videos in this great scenario-based demo video series that we prepared just for you. Also, make sure to check out our one-stop shop resource page that we prepared just for you that contains all our resources from the MIP-CXC team. That's at aka.ms/MIP-C/OSS. Thank you, and see you on our next videos.